Hello everybody, good morning to all. So, আজি আমি history new chapter number 3 in the earliest cities. এই chapterটো আমি start কৰিবলৈ লৈছো আজি. So, first আমি chapterটো reading কৰিম কি আছে ইয়াতে. তাৰ পিছত আমি চেপ্টাৰটো আমি এক্সপ্লেইন কৰিম বা এক্সপ্লেইন কৰি দিম কি দিয়া আছে চেপ্টাৰটোত কি ক'ব বিচাৰিছে কাৰ কথা কোৱা হৈছে ঠিক আছে তো আজি আমি ফাৰ্ষ্ট চেপ্টাৰটো এবাৰ ৰিড কৰিম থৰলি কি আছে চেপ্টাৰটোত ওকে তো চেপ্টাৰটোৰ নাম হৈছে ইন দ্য আৰ্লিয়েষ্ট চিটিজ সেভিং এন ওল্ড বিল্ডিং জাসপাল এণ্ড হৰপ্ৰীত ৱেৰ প্লেয়িং ক্ৰিকেট ইন দ্য লেণ্ড outside their home when they noticed the people who were admiring the dilapidated old building that the children called the haunted house. Look at the architecture, said one of the men. Have you seen the fine wood carving? Asked one of the women. We must write to the minister so that she makes arrangements to repair and preserve this beautiful house. Why, they wondered, would anybody be interested in the old run-down house? The story of Harappa. Very often, old buildings have a story to tell. Nearly 150 years ago, when railway lines were being laid down for the first time in the Punjab, engineers stumbled upon the site of Harappa in present-day Pakistan. To them, it seemed like a mound that was a rich source of ready-made high-quality bricks. So they carried off thousands of bricks from the walls of the old buildings of the city to build railway lines. Many buildings were completely destroyed. Then, about 80 years ago, archaeologists found the site and realized that this was one of the oldest cities in the subcontinent. As this was the first city to be discovered, all other cities from where similar buildings and other things were found were described as Harappa. These cities developed about 4,700 years ago. Very often, old buildings are pulled down to make way for new construction. Do you think it is important to preserve old buildings? What was special about these cities? Many of these cities were divided into two or more parts. Usually the part to the west was smaller but higher. Archaeologists describe this as the citadel. Generally, the part to the east was larger but lower. This is called the lower town. Very often, walls of baked brick were built around each part. The bricks were so well baked that they have lasted for thousands of years. Bricks were laid in an interlocking pattern and that made the walls strong. In some cities, special buildings were constructed on the citadel. For example, in Mohenjo-daro, a very special tank which archaeologists call the Great Bath was built in this area. This was lined with bricks, coated with plaster and made watertight with a layer of natural tar. There were steps leading down to it from two sides, while there were rooms on all sides. Water was probably brought in from a well and drained out after use. Perhaps important people took a dip in this tank on special occasions. Other cities such as Kalibangan and Lothal had fire altars where sacrifices may have been performed, and some cities like Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, and Lothal had elaborate storehouses. Houses, drains, and streets. Generally, houses were either one of two stories high, with rooms built around a courtyard. Most houses had a separate bathing area and some had wells to supply water. Many of these cities had covered drains. Notice how carefully these were laid out in straight lines, although you cannot see it. Each drain had a gentle slope so that water could flow through it. Very often, drains in houses were connected to those on the streets, and smaller drains led into bigger ones. As the drains were covered, inspection holes were provided at intervals to clean them. All three houses, drains, and streets were probably planned and built at the same time. Life in the city. A Harappan city was a very busy place. There were people who planned the construction of special buildings in the city. These were probably the rulers. It is likely that the rulers sent people to distant lands to get metal, precious stones, and other things that they wanted. They may have kept the most valuable objects, such as ornaments of gold and silver or beautiful beds, for themselves. And there were scribes, people who knew how to write, who helped prepare the seals and perhaps wrote on other materials that have not survived. Besides, there were men and women, craftspersons making all kinds of things, either in their own homes or in special workshops. People were traveling to distant lands or returning with raw materials and perhaps stories. Many terracotta toys have been found, and children must have played with these. Make a list of the people who lived in the city. Were any of these people listed as living in villages such as Mehergarh? New crafts in the city. Let us look at some of the objects that were made and found in Harappan cities. Most of the things that have been found by archaeologists were made of stone, steel, and metal, including copper, bronze, gold, and silver. Copper and bronze were used to make tools, weapons, ornaments, and vessels. Gold and silver were used to make ornaments and vessels. Perhaps the most striking finds are those of beds, weights, and blades. The Harappans also made seals out of stones. These are generally rectangular. Use illustration on page 27 and usually have an animal carved on them. The Harappans also made pots with beautiful black designs, such as the one shown on page number 6. Cotton was probably grown at Mehergarh from about 7,000 years ago. Actual pieces of cloth were found attached to the lid of a silver vase and some copper objects. At Mohenjo-daro, archaeologists have also found spindle whorls. Unlike stone or shell that are found naturally, faience is a material that is artificially produced. A gum was used to shape sand or powdered quartz into an object. The objects were then glazed, resulting in a shiny, glassy surface. The colors of the glaze were usually blue or sea green. Faience was used to make beads, bangles, earrings, and tiny vessels. Made of terracotta and faience. These were used to spin thread. Many of the things that were produced were probably the work of specialists. A specialist is a person who is trained to do only one kind of work. For example, cutting stone or polishing beads or carving seals. Look at the illustration, page 28, and see how well the face is carved and how carefully the beard is sewn. This must have been the work of an expert craftsperson. Not everybody could have been a specialist. We do not know whether only men were specialists or only women were specialists. Perhaps some women and men may have been specialists. Insults of raw materials. Raw materials are substances that are either found naturally, such as wood or ores or metals, or produced by farmers or herders. These are then processed to produce finished goods. For example, cotton produced by farmers is a raw material that may be processed to make cloth, while some of the raw materials that the Harappans used were available locally. Many items such as copper, tin, gold, silver, and precious stones had to be brought from distant places. The Harappans probably got copper from present day Rajasthan and even from Oman in West Asia, which was mixed with copper to produce bronze, may have been brought from present day Afghanistan and Iran. Gold could have come all the way from present day Karnataka and precious stones from present day Gujarat, Iran, and Afghanistan. Food for people in the cities. While many people lived in the cities, others living in the countryside grew crops and reared animals. These farmers and herders supplied food to crafts persons, scribes, and rulers in the cities. We know from remains of plants that the Harappans grew wheat, barley, pulses, peas, rice, sesame, linseed, and mustard. A new tool, the plough, was used to dig the earth for turning the soil and planting seeds, while real ploughs, which were probably made of wood, have not survived. Toy models have been found. As this region does not receive heavy rainfall, some form of irrigation may have been used. This means that water was stored and supplied to the fields when the plants were growing. The Harappans reared cattle, sheep, goat, and buffalo. Water and pastures were available around settlements. However, in the dry summer months, large herds of animals were probably taken to greater distances in search of grass and water. They also collected fruits like bear, caught fish, and hunted wild animals like the antelope. A closer look, Harappan towns in Gujarat. The city of Dholavira was located on Khadir Bed, also spelled as Bet, in the Rann of Kutch, where there was fresh water and fertile soil. Unlike some of the other Harappan cities, which were divided into two parts, Dholavira was divided into three parts, and each part was surrounded with massive stone walls. With entrances through gateways, there was also a large open area in the settlement where public ceremonies could be held. Other finds include large letters of the Harappan script that were carved out of white stone and perhaps inlaid in wood. This is a unique find as generally Harappan writing has been found on small objects such as seals. The city of Lothal stood beside a tributary of the Sabarmati in Gujarat, close to the Gulf of Khambat. It was situated near areas where raw materials such as semi-precious stones were easily available. This was an important center for making objects out of stone, steel, and metal. There was also a stone house in the city. Many seals and ceilings, the impression of seals on clay, were found in this storehouse. So চেপ্টাৰটো বহুত দীঘলীয়া হয় আমাৰ আৰু অলপ বাকী ৰ'ল সো আমি যোনখিনি বাকী ৰ'ল সেইখিনি আমি কাইলৈকে আমি ৰিড কৰিম এণ্ড লগতে আমি যেতিয়া নেক্সট ক্লাছ আছে তেতিয়া ৰিড কৰিম এণ্ড লগতে আমাৰ যি আমি ইয়াতে পালোঁ চেপ্টাৰটোত কি কোৱা আছে সেইখিনি আমি আছামিজত অলপ এক্সপ্লেইন কৰিম ডিছকাছ কৰিম অ'কে ঠিক আছে সো তোমালোকে ৰিডিং কৰিবা চেপ্টাৰটো স্পেলিংবোৰ প্ৰনাউন্স কৰিবা ট্ৰাই কৰিবা যোনখিনিলৈকে আজি আমি ৰিডিং কৰিলোঁ সো ঘৰত তোমালোকে এবাৰ ৰিডিং কৰিবা অ'কে Thank you.